We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides.
I will be Donald Trump's most loyal advocate to make sure his nominees go to the Supreme Court.
That from former KKK Grand Wizard David Duke.
On August 11th, a group of protesters marched through the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia, carrying torches and shouting provocative and derogatory chants. The next day, a Unite the Right demonstration took place to protest the removal of the Confederate statue of Robert E. Lee. White supremacists, KKK members, the alt-right, neo-Nazis, neo-Confederates, and the Traditional Workers' Party marched, as well as a group of counter-protesters that included Black Lives Matter and anti-fascist groups. Violence broke out between the two groups throughout the weekend.
KKK and white supremacist groups and hate groups marching in the streets of our country, right? It's going to be charged. Not to mention the fact that, these guys came, I don't want to say ready for a fight, but yeah, ready for a fight. The first night they were uniformed like a militia. They were carrying torches. History shows us that when you uniform yourself, when you carry weapons like they did the next day, when you use chants, these are signs of organizations coming together to other people and dehumanize other and to gain their own power. And these were some of the tactics that the marchers in Charlottesville used.
President Trump released a statement later that day. Nowhere in his speech did he address the guilty parties for who they were. It took him 2 days and harsh criticism from the public and a select few congressmen for him to say the words, KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists.
I think all elected officials need to stand up and say that white supremacy is not an accepted ideology in this country.
Established in 1866, the KKK reached out into practically every southern state. By 1870, the hate group turned into a vehicle for white Southern protection from the Republican Party's Reconstruction. Its individuals pursued an underground crusade of terrorizing. The group saw its essential goal, the restoration of white supremacy, satisfied through the democratic triumphs in state governing bodies across the nation.
Many radical KKK members have been elected into various government positions throughout history, such as Hugo Black, who became a Supreme Court justice under Franklin D. Roosevelt. It was later uncovered that he was at one point part of the KKK. Edward L. Jackson was a well-known KKK member in the early 1920s and was elected as a senator of Indiana in 1925. Soon after being elected, his administration came under fire for granting undue favor to the Klan's associates and agenda. During the early 1920s in Europe, tensions arose between Europeans and the Jewish community, an example being the rapidly spreading view that Jews were an economic burden. This was a key period of time that influenced the rest of the world and demonstrated the buildup of extreme anti-Semitic views. Meanwhile, in the United States, a law that reflected this growing anti-Semitism was passed by Congress. The Immigration Act of 1924 was a federal law that limited the annual amount of immigrants who could be admitted from any country to 2% of the number of people from that country who were living in the U.S. in 1890, a period before mass immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe. Defending this law, Calvin Coolidge said, "America must be kept America." This slogan reflected the desire to preserve racial purity. In 2015, Attorney General Jeff Sessions cited the 1924 Immigration Act as a precedent for dealing with immigration in the 21st century America.
One constant in American history is we have waves of anti-immigrant sentiment. That happened in the 1920s and the 1930s. Now again, we're seeing another wave of anti-immigrant sentiment.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
As someone who studies government and studies history, I was incredibly let down and embarrassed by his response It did nothing to heal the conflict. It did nothing to bring people together.
White supremacy has nothing but violence and hate in its history, and the events that took place in Charlottesville were inexcusable. By comparing those who marched with the Nazis, white nationalists, black separatists, and Ku Klux Klan to the Antifa and radical left protesters is a way for Trump to take multiple stances on the issue.
We encourage Republican congresspeople to push Trump to speak directly about these hate groups that have given him so much support. This isn't a matter of plain politics, it's a matter of morals and an issue of our humanity.